So here we are around 592 in the time of captivity of the nation of Israel in Babylon. And we only have one writer writing to them, that's Ezekiel. But during the same general time frame, we have just a little bit later, perhaps, Daniel writing, and the Lamentations of Jeremiah, going back to 627 and 605 for Daniel. So right now we're just focusing on Ezekiel and what was he writing to these people that were in exile. What was God's message to them these 70 years that they were in bondage? And so far we've taken a look at Ezekiel in chapter 1. We've looked at the fact that in chapter 1 he was called by God. He saw 4 living creatures, which are also seen out in the book of Revelation. We looked at chapter 2 and we saw the commissioning to the Jews in exile. Rebellious, stubborn, obstinate, hard-headed people. And that's the task that poor Ezekiel had to do, is deal with those people. In chapter 3, we find the witnessing, even if they're not going to listen, and warning to Ezekiel that if he didn't witness to those that were in that land in exile, that the blood would be on his hands. And if he didn't warn those that were righteous that were slipping away, the blood would be on his hand. If he didn't witness to those that had no faith at all, blood was on his hands. So he had a tough job. And chapter 4 is really incredibly interesting, because if pastors today think we have a hard time, then all they have to do is look at Ezekiel and see what God asked him to do. We think it's hard now to make decisions about whether to open churches, not to open churches, to have a very worldly congregation and to try to bring them back to God's standards. But I think as you look at chapter 4 of the book of Ezekiel and the things that God asked him to do, you'll recognize that we have it easy compared to Ezekiel. So let's talk about that for just a minute. In chapter 4, we have one of the most unusual things that a pastor could ever be asked to do. Ezekiel is asked to take a stone or a brick and to engrave on it a picture or a map of Jerusalem. And he's to lay it on the ground, and then he's to lay on his left side, facing the picture of Jerusalem. And it's supposed to represent the sin of Judah and Israel. For one day that he's going to lay on his side represents 1 year of iniquity. That goes from Jeroboam about 931 BC all the way down to the destruction of Jerusalem, 390 years. And Ezekiel is asked to lay there on his left side for 390 days. Now, I know you don't have to have me tell you this, but that's over a year. 365 days to a year. Over a year, Jeremiah is going to lay down on his left side with this brick with a picture of Jerusalem, Judea on it, representing the iniquity that's been there in the land. And he's going to actually talk about the siege of Jerusalem, as well as he gives this testimony. Now, you know that everybody that passes by him is going to say, "What in the world are you doing?" And he's going to have to give the explanation to each person that passes by. Nevertheless, then he's told to turn over to his right side, and for another 40 days, he will lay there facing this map on the brick, And this will represent the iniquity again of Judah. And he's going to place a metal pan, like a cooking pan, between he and the city and the country. And he's going to have ropes tied to him so that he can't turn from one side to the other. And it's going to represent the days of the siege as well. And it's it's probably one of the most unusual visual aids that preachers ever used. I thought one time about doing that, laying down on the platform of the church with a brick with a picture of Judea and Jerusalem on it, and a pan between me and the thing to introduce a message on Ezekiel, but I never got up the courage to do that kind of an act because it would look kind of silly. Although I have done some silly things in the pulpit before, and I guess my people wouldn't have been too surprised if I'd done it. So I found a picture from the internet that kind of depicts what Ezekiel was doing here as he was representing not only the iniquity of the people for all of those years, that's 390 plus 40 years of iniquity, and then the siege of Jerusalem, where he actually builds up a siege ramp to take over the city of Jerusalem. And here's that picture so that you can get kind of a picture of what poor Ezekiel had to do to demonstrate God's displeasure with their iniquity for all of those years and the siege that he brought upon Jerusalem as a result of their iniquity. Well, I don't know about you, but I would not like to have had Ezekiel's particular responsibility to God to have to lay 390 days. I don't know how many hours a day he laid there, but to lay there 390 days and then 40 more days to show the people of Israel that were in bondage, that their iniquity had forced God to destroy Judea and Jerusalem. And it certainly was a difficult assignment, and I'm glad I didn't have it. But as I meditated on that whole section of scripture in Ezekiel and looked at it as more than history and more than a warning to the nation of Israel and as a reminder of their iniquity, I thought to myself, I wonder how many days Ezekiel would have had to lay on his side for my iniquity, for all of the years that I did things that were displeasing to God. That, after all, sin is anything displeasing to God. I wonder about you. As you're watching this video, how many days would Ezekiel have to have laid on his side while you continued to have thoughts that you shouldn't have, conversations that you shouldn't have, actions that you shouldn't have had? How long would he have had to lay on his side with a brick with your picture on it, your selfie? Well, that's my thought for the day. Have a great day.